So the NASCAR 2018 season has ended. All 36 races are down in the books. And as I promised, I was going to do a review on this season, what I thought of it, and as it says at the top, the good, the bad, and the ugly on the 2018 season. There's a lot of good, there was a lot of bad, and there was some ugly as well during the season. So kicking it off, overall, I think this season was a pretty solid season. I wouldn't call it anywhere close to the best season ever. That can be saved for something like 2001, 2011, 2004, those seasons, 90, whatever, 92, 93, 94. But this season was a pretty darn good season. And in fact, I would probably call it a top 3 Gen 6 season easily. I would definitely put it ahead of 2017, ahead of 2015, ahead of 2013 easily. And I, in my mind, I think it could compete with 2014, 2016. Now, once again, that's just my mind. Obviously, some other people might think, 2014, 2016 are way better. But I think that the second half of 2018 could definitely compete. And maybe even if you just got rid of the first half of the season and looked at the second half of the season, it could probably beat 2014 and 2016 based on its excitement factor. However, there are two parts of the season, and it was a tale of two halves for sure this season. If it was just based off the first half, I'd probably give it a 4 or 5 out of 10. But if it was just based on the second half, definitely an 8 or 9, or close to a 10. Almost the second half of the season was. It was a tremendous second half of the season, and that's all in part, as you see, thanks to NBC. Has a nice little green check mark. Fox, that red X, I don't know what it was. I'll get to that a little bit later, but I'm going to continue to talk about how I felt about this season. So the start of the season did start slow. We had some, throughout Fox's portion of the coverage, we had some good races sprinkled throughout. The Daytona 500, Atlanta was a pretty unnoticed kind of solid race. We had Phoenix, which was pretty solid, and then Bristol was a pretty good race. Richmond was pretty good. Kansas was pretty good. But really, those were like the 3 good races throughout Fox's portion of the season. Martinsville was lackluster. It was still a good race. It was just kind of lackluster. Texas was all right. Charlotte was kind of good. Pocono was all right. I mean, it wasn't really great. But then you had it felt like with Fox's part, if there was a bad race, it wasn't just bad, it was horrible. The first Michigan race, Las Vegas, we had Sonoma, which was pretty bad. Auto Club was worse than normal. I don't know what it was. It was it was good up until I wouldn't say good. It was solid up until Truex ran away with it because Kyle Busch's crew made the wrong adjustments. But yeah, that was kind of a letdown as well. And then we got to whatever, I think Chicago's race 17 or 18. We got to that part of the season, and it took off. Chicagoland, in my opinion, up there for the best race of the year. The Summer Daytona race, pretty good race as well. We had Loudon, which was good. The Brickyard was good. Pocono was good. Watkins Glen was fantastic. Bristol was absolutely fantastic. Darlington was good. Las Vegas was good. Richmond was solid. I wouldn't call it good. I would call it solid. The Roval was fantastic. You had Dover, which was better than normal. You had Kansas, which was pretty much like the first one. I'd give actually the first Kansas race a heads up over this Kansas race, though. Talladega was pretty lackluster. But then you got Martinsville, which was great. Phoenix was great, and Homestead was great. I mean, NBC, they have 18 or 19 races during the season. And in my mind, I would say more than half of those were considered good races. I would say maybe 14, 15 of those races were considered good. Michigan and Kentucky were horrible, same with Texas. But otherwise, Talladega maybe as well. But otherwise, I don't really see any other horrible races where I was just kind of those were really the only bad races for NBC. And some of that wasn't even the car's fault. It was more just the track and how they had to repave it and whatnot. But so yeah, that's what I'm saying about NBC and Fox. Fox, it was more of just plain old stuff. It just seems like Fox has cared less and less about motorsports the farther on we're going, and NBC has cared more and more about motorsports. They seem to be like the next motorsports network. They have IndyCar. I think they got IMSA. I think they're getting it. And did they get motocross? I don't remember, but they're getting a lot of motorsports. They're coming alive. They'll probably get NHRA soon. They might get all of NASCAR whenever the next contract expires. Who knows? But so NBC did a great job. Fox was pretty lackluster. And the thing about NBC that I really liked this season, they changed up their broadcasts. They didn't keep it the same old, same old. They changed it. One race would have Steve and Junior in one booth, Jeff and Rick in another booth, and then they would take turns kind of calling the race. The next race, Dale and Jeff were in a booth with Steve and Rick in another booth. Another race, say Steve Letarte is down the pit box, and then you have Jeff Jr. and Alan in the NBC booth. You go to Watkins Glen, Indianapolis, they do radio coverage, radio type coverage, which is pretty darn cool. You know, they had Steve and Junior both down the pit box, I think, for the Xfinity race at Daytona. So, I mean, they did some different things, which worked out. And, it was different. It was kind of a nice, fresh, what breath of fresh air. I almost said a fresh of breath air. But it's a breath of fresh air that NBC did this season. And they just have some great personalities. Well, Kyle Petty tells it like it is. They have Dale Jarrett. Jarrett's a very underrated broadcaster, in my opinion. Rick Allen got a lot better. Same with Steve Letarte and Jeff Burton. And then Dale Jr., his first season broadcasting, but he brought in a lot of enthusiasm that definitely made the broadcast, in my opinion, better. Enthusiasm, you can never have too much of it. Well, you could have too much of it, but if it's good enthusiasm, it's contagious. We saw that with Benny Parsons. When Parsons did his NBC stint from 2001 to 2006, that was contagious. He was a very good broadcaster. He showed excitement for the sport, and it was true, enthusiasm and excitement. It wasn't over the top like, say, Darrell Waltrip does, but it was excitement. And that's what Junior reminds me of Benny Parsons, where he's kind of enthusiastic and he loves the sport and he wants to do, more for the sport. So NBC, A plus. Terrific job. Fox really needs to step it up next season. They're kind of falling behind, and with them, cutting all their motorsports, it makes me a little worried. The next time the contract comes around, will NBC get all 36 races, and is Fox just going to be like, we're done. We're done with the motorsports. NBC right now, though, they're and even their promotions, like their ads and stuff. Oh my God, the Homestead one with they took such a simple song in Queens, "We Are the Champions," and they made it into like an actual hyped up thing for the Homestead Championship race. I mean, who would have thought that you could take the words, I've taken my bows and my curtain calls, brought me fame and fortune. I thank you all, but it's been no bed of roses, no pleasure cruise, I consider it a challenge among the whole human race, and I ain't gonna lose. That's what they use that for a promotion, and they made it work with those four drivers. Props to NBC on that, as Fox was doing some weird stuff with their truck. And that's another thing. Their truck thing was horrible, but I'm focusing on the Cup thing. So, I mean, if we're lucky, NBC would get the trucks for the full season. Please, dear God, get rid of Vince Welsh right now. So, yeah, now I'm going to start ranking my races. This ranking, is just what I feel. You may feel something different. You may like a different type of race than me, and that's fine. These are, in my mind, what the best races of the season were. I'm going to rank it from 36 to number 1. So, let's get to it. On the list, number 36, Kentucky. Nothing at all happened in Kentucky. Repaves never work. Kentucky didn't even work before the repave. It's another boring 1.5 mile track, and it's probably the most boring one there is. I hate Kentucky. I've hated it since they repaved it. I hated it. The only good race I had was 2015. That was with like the 2016 package. So, I mean, yeah, Kentucky is horrible. There's not really much to say. Truex pretty much dominated, and I remember I think like Kurt Busch stayed out on like 2 tires or something. He held off Truex for like laps because it was so hard to pass. Yeah, it was not good. Number 35 is the first Las Vegas race. This race was also meh. I mean, Harvick dominated. There were barely any lead changes, barely any battles for the lead. Harvick just dominated. That plain and simple, he pulled away. And then the only notable thing about it was the window gate, where the rear window was dented in on Harvick's car. Otherwise, Vegas was another snoozer. Number 34 is the first Dover race. dominated by Kevin Harvick and Clint Bowyer alike. Harvick more so dominated than Bowyer. He pulled away to like a 7/7 second lead and ended up winning the race. Once again, another boring race, and it was ironically won by Kevin Harvick. So Harvick wins all the boring races apparently this season. Moving on, number 33, the first Talladega race. In my opinion, the worst super speedway race of the season was the first Talladega race. At the end, no one made a move. In fact, Joey Logano just led the final however many laps and won the race. It was a pretty bad race, and it was all part because of Jamie McMurray flipping in practice and NASCAR overreacting and changing the plate package just for that one race. Number 32 is the first Michigan race. This race was also really, really bad. So Kurt Busch, I think, started on pole. He was up front. He got the lead from Kevin Harvick. And Harvick had the fastest car of the day. It could not get by Kurt Busch. I'm recording this late at night, so I'm really tired. But, yeah, Harvick had the best car, could not get by Kurt Busch for so long. I mean, it was horrible. And then, so Harvick got, around him, dominated, and then the yellow came out. And then Bowyer took 2 tires because the rain was coming in, ended up pulling Kevin Harvick off on the 2 tires and ended up winning because of the rain. Horrible race all around. Number 31 is the second Texas race. Some people would say that this is a lot higher than it should be. In my mind, at least there were some battles during the race. It could have been a lot better for sure. But, it was once again kind of boring. It was a repave. Repaves never work out. I've showed my disdain for repaves for so long. At least at the end, Blaney tried to put up a fight against Harvick, and it ended in overtime. So I guess that was pretty cool. Otherwise, not much to talk about there. Number 30 is Sonoma. Normally one of my favorite races of the season, and it was pretty dull this season. So I think stages really have ruined this race because the only right strategy is, the only right strategy is to pit just before the stage ends, get those tires, and then restart front for the stage. I guess the cool part about this race was the strategy there at the end of the final stage where Truex's crew chief faked out Kevin Harvick and put them behind, and then Truex dominated the rest of the race and won. There was no yellow to the end. For number 29, ironically, the second Michigan race. So Michigan has 2 of some of the worst races of this season. I felt this race just a little bit better. Harvick dominated it once again, but at least I felt like you could pass a little bit better than you could in the spring. And Harvick was able to get around some drivers easier. Austin Dillon tried 2 tires, I believe, at the end. Didn't work out. Harvick got by him, and then Dillon had a flat from second at the white flag lap. So that was tough for him. He was going to get second, but, that's number 29, second Michigan race. Number 28 is the second Talladega race. What type of season is it when Talladega has 2 of some of the lowest rated races on the season? But yes, the second Talladega race, also known as the SHR 500. Stewart-Haas Racing dominated their 1, 2, 3, 4 for most of the race. However, when SHR was now out front, if you look at the Stage 3 restart where SHR is kind of further back in the field, they are 3 wide, all the way back. So, in my opinion, the package is fine, because they were 3 wide all the way back. It was just one manufacturer had ridiculously fast cars. They kind of had it, towed out to where they were fast, and they obviously weren't out of control either. And then when all 4 of them were lined up and not making a move on each other, it's very hard. And we even saw at the end of the race, they were bound for they were bound like hell, 5th on back. They were 3 wide, trying to race each other, and just those front 4 stayed single file, and they pulled away. And that's the only reason they, if those 4 were not lined up, it probably would have been a good race. But since they got lined up and they did what they had to do, it was a pretty boring race. At least we had a pretty good finish because of the caution and the fuel mileage and all that. It's kind of sad it had to come down fuel mileage. Number 27 is Fontana. Fontana is normally one of the better races of the season as well. This season, it was pretty dull. Most part because of Kyle Busch's pit crew going the wrong way on adjustments and Martin Truex Jr. stealing the victory. And I think it was over 10 seconds he won by. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really tired, so late. I have to get this over with. But yeah, Fontana, pretty dull this season. Number 26 was the first Pocono race. I would say this was a pretty 50-50 race. Pretty meh race, in my opinion. I don't really know what to say about it. I mean, there was some passing. I was there, so it looked a lot better than probably on TV. But, yeah, I don't really know what to say about Pocono. Number 25 is the second Dover race. So the second Dover race, in my opinion, was a lot better than the first one. And Harvick dominated once again. And I felt like it was a lot worse than I thought it was going to be. But luckily Harvick had some issues on pit road, made it a race. Some cautions came out towards the end, which made it kind of exciting. There was the big crash, and Chase Elliott ended up winning his second career race. So how about that? So number 25 is the second Dover race. Number 24 is the first Texas race. Harvick and Kyle Busch. That was the first time we would see them battle head-to-head in this season. Ended up being Kyle Busch getting to victory lane, but a lot of crashes in this race. I can't stop yawning, but a lot of crashes in this race, and Kyle Busch got out front because Harvick had a pit penalty and ended up winning the race. Number 23 is the first Martinsville race. It was a good race, decent race. It could have been a lot better, though, and it was definitely bad for Martinsville standards. There were like 3 drivers that led 100 laps or something, but in the end, Clint Bowyer broke his winless streak, but I think there's only like 1 accident in the race, like 1 caution caused by an accident during the race. It was a pretty tame Martinsville race overall. Number 22 is the Coca-Cola 600. This is a race where a lot of people probably have lower on their list because Kyle Busch led, I think, all but like 22 laps or something in the race. But if I remember, Fox actually showed some racing from second on back, and it was pretty darn good. We saw a lot of faces during the 600 up in second place. I think Denny Hamlin, Eric Jones, Kyle Larson, Jamie McMurray, Jimmy Johnson, probably more that I'm forgetting about. But I mean, I think Keselowski was up there, Logano may have been up there. It was a big list of drivers that were up inside the top 5 throughout the race, and it kept changing. And Kyle Busch absolutely dominated it, but the racing second on back was good. And that's why it's actually so high up. It's because the racing second on back was so good. Number 21 is the Atlanta race. I feel like this race was solid, in my opinion. I think it had like 24 lead changes or something. I mean, it's a pretty big amount. But Harvick dominated again. He kind of pulled away and made a stinker at the end. So Atlanta, 21. Number 20 is the Daytona 500. So a lot of people actually have this race higher on the list. I just didn't really see much in it that kind of like, made it special. If I remember, there's a good amount of single file, especially towards the end of the race, until Byron spun out. There's that good finish, but otherwise, there's a lot of crashes and whatnot, so I didn't really see, I didn't really like the Daytona 500. That's why it's number 20. Number 19 is the second Pocono race, which in my opinion was a pretty good Pocono race. Being there, at least, it was pretty good. So there was a lot of... I feel like there's a lot of strategy. Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick had to come from the back. They ended up being some of the dominant cars. Harvick, especially. Kyle Busch ended up winning the race. But, yeah, you had Bubba Wallace's crash, which was pretty scary being there. Jesus. You could hear that impact from miles away. Good God. Yeah, and overall, I thought that this was actually a pretty good Pocono race. So, Pocono, number 19. Number 18, I have the first Phoenix race, which was, once again, another pretty solid race that kind of flew under the radar. At one point, there were like 4 cars battling for the lead within a second of each other. And overall, it's just a pretty solid race. Kyle Busch, I think it was like a 100-lap green flag run at the end or something. Kyle Busch won by under a second. So, you got a pretty good race when you go over 100 laps and the margin of victory is under 1 second. So, yeah, that's all I could say about Phoenix. Number 17 is the night race at Daytona. In my opinion, was just a little bit better than the Daytona 500. I don't know what it was, but I just felt like they were more racy and you can make more runs. I don't know if they brought a different package or what, but I felt like that the night race at Daytona was a lot better than the Daytona 500. I think there was like 25 lead changes during the race. And once again, a lot of crashes, which I didn't like. I didn't like that part of the race at all. It was a big crash fest. But... whenever they were racing, it was a pretty good race. And Eric Jones won his first race with a last lap pass. Can't get much better than that. Number 16 is Darlington, which this race actually kind of surprised me on Jeff Gluck's pole. This race, from what I can remember, was green, 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 green. We had a yellow flag, some pit stops, and then Keselowski stole the win from Larson. Larson absolutely dominated the race. My biggest shock is that this race is not voted lower in Gluck's poll because of the green flag runs. there were like 8 lead changes during the race, I think. And most of that was probably because of green flag pit stops. I mean, like, 8? Are you serious? Like, come on now. I mean, that's not really Darlington. But once again, Darlington is one of those tracks that can get away with a long green flag run and still be a good race. So Darlington, number 16, could have been a lot better. Could have been a lot worse as well. Darlington's just a cool racetrack overall. Number 15, I have the second Richmond race, which was a decent race overall. Truex was dominant at the beginning. He had a pit penalty. I think he had to go to the back. It took him all race to fight back, and he actually ended up third. And Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch battled at the end again. In fact, I think it was the first time of the season the Big Three finished 1, 2, 3. And Richmond, it was kind of dull though. I don't know, were there any caution? I think there was one caution for an accident, but other than that, I didn't really live up to the hype that was built around it. For number 14, I have the second Kansas race, the Chase Kansas race. So Kansas has actually become one of the better 1.5 mile tracks. I think in a few more years it'll definitely be a lot better because they'll be wearing the tires out more. But I felt like this race was actually kind of good. There were some multiple grooves. Not one driver really dominated the race at all. And Chase Elliott, once again, he stole a win for Kevin Harvick because Harvick had a pit penalty. So, I think it went over 100 laps at the end. And once again, margin of victory within a second. So, second Kansas race, number 14. And ironically, right next to it, number 13, is the first Kansas race. So the first Kansas race, in my opinion, was a little better than the second one, mainly due to the part of the late craziness that kind of set up the interesting stuff. But there were some good stage battles for the stage wins. Larson, Blaney, and Harvick, I think, were the 3 dominant cars. And really, I just think it was a good trade. You had Larson run the wall, Blaney and whatnot, and then Harvick. It was a pretty cool race overall. And at the end, all that craziness with Byron's crash and then Truex staying out on the tires or taking 2 or something, trying to fend off Harvick, and they had the pass for the win at the white flag lap. So it came down to the final lap. That's what we want out of a race. Number 12, and this one actually surprised me. Indianapolis was pretty high up on my list. It was a pretty good race, especially for Indianapolis standards. One of the better Indianapolis races, definitely. Their strategy, once again, there was actually passing, and it came down once again to the end. With 2 to go, the leaders were bumping down the backstretch. You don't see bumping at Indianapolis. Yet, here we are. We saw bumping at Indianapolis for the lead down the backstretch. Keselowski with his tires got around Hamlin. They did the radio broadcast well. NBC did pretty good race overall. Number 11, the second Phoenix race. My gosh, the layout actually provided a difference. It was actually a really good race. Phoenix was I think this is like, that final Phoenix race of the season is a very underrated weekend in the NASCAR schedule. I just feel like it's always really good. And this one was definitely a lot, I think this one was one of the better ones in years past. We saw those restarts were crazy. Coming down to the end of stage 1 at the white flag, I think it was Harvick blew a tire and had to come down the pit lane and surrender a ton of points in the chase. It made it, crazy. And Chase Elliott took over the lead. It looked like he was going to win his way into the final round. And then you had some more pit dredging, cars moving around all over the place. And then you had the big crash with Hamlin going for the lead 4 wide and all this, and then chase scenarios, and then Kyle Busch ends up winning over Brad Keselowski. A great race, and it just missed out being inside the top 10. And Loudon beat it for the top 10. New Hampshire in number 10. How about that? Loudon, New Hampshire. A race which normally, associates with pretty boring. Pretty exciting this race. We had passing for the lead. We had the slide job with Chase Elliott. We had, amazing battles all over the place. And we had that crazy finish with Harvick bumping Kyle Busch out of the way. I mean, once again, a race which is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated races of the season. Like, my gosh, Loudon, pretty good. In number 9, never thought I would say this track inside the top 10, Las Vegas, a season of surprises. Las Vegas, Loudon, and Indianapolis, all inside the top 12. Vegas, the second Vegas race, the Chase Vegas race, number 9. I think I had like 25 lead changes, 24 or 25 lead changes. Absolutely amazing. At one point, and I'm really sad that Hamlin actually had to crash, get into the grass, because leading up to that, 4 cars were under the blanket. It was like a 4-car recipe for a crash. And it was Larson running in the wall, trying to hold off Keselowski, who's running the bottom. And my gosh, and then Truex was trying to come in with his longer run car. If that would have stayed green to the end, I would have been fine, because it looked like it was going to be the perfect battle. My gosh, what an amazing race that was. The crashing at the end was a little over excessive, but it was crazy, and it just shows what a hot racetrack, a hot slick racetrack will do for you. Number 8, the first Richmond race was a pretty good race. I don't think there were never many big leads during the race. A lot of battling for the lead. It was calm for the first 350 laps, and then we got down to the end, and my gosh, it was just short track craziness at the end. So Richmond holds the number 8 spot, and it definitely deserves it. Number 7 is the first Bristol race, which was, once again, craziness in a nutshell. The only thing that's really holding it back is the fact that the rain just kept coming and coming and coming and messing up just the flow of the race overall. But great race. We saw Larson spin out, come back, and almost win the darn thing, and it was a bump and run for the win. I mean, my gosh, that was short track racing at its finest, but there were better short track moments. Number 6, a race which is underappreciated, Homestead. I mean, come on. Homestead was so great. 22 lead changes. I've mentioned it. It's tied for the third most in that track's history, only behind 2011 and 2007. And the last restart had the final 4 restarting first, second, third, and fourth. What more could you want out of this race? Once again, Joey Logano won, which probably swayed the results and swayed how people thought about the race. But it went green, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for Homestead. Like I said, Darlington is a race which can get away with that. Homestead's one too. It can get away with that because it just allows the top to come in, allows some tire fall off. We saw last lap pass for stage 2. I mean, we saw Logano's amazing pass to get around Trix. We saw Trix and Logano bumping and banging for the championship. Pretty entertaining race. Homestead, number 6, won the better race of the season. Now we get down to the final 5. Number 5 is Watkins Glen. Chase Elliott's breakthrough to win the race. In my opinion, absolute fantastic race throughout the whole thing. There always seemed like there was a battle for the lead. There was some different strategies. Kyle Busch, I think he restarted like that final restart in 27th and came up to finish 3rd at the end. What a beast, man. I mean, that was amazing. And then Chase Elliott and Martin Truex Jr. pulling away, and those two questionable on fuel. And Chase Elliott ends up beating Truex out even after making a mistake or two and winning his first race. Watkins Glen was definitely one of the better races of the season. And being it out for the best road course of the season, number 4 is the Charlotte Roval. This race had everything. Like, literally, if you wanted a green flag run, you got a green flag run during the race. If you wanted pit strategy, you had pit strategy during the race. If you wanted clean hard racing, you had clean hard racing during the race. If you wanted complete craziness, you had complete craziness during the race. I mean, there was literally everything. The Charlotte Roval lived up to its hype and then some. We saw pretty calm early on in the race, and then it started to get a little bit more crazy, and then the third stage was absolute madness. We saw some of that pit strategy with Keselowski holding off Larson trying to get around him. They've raced side by side for a few quarters there in the infield. Keselowski was holding him off. Larson looked like he was going to get it, and then a yellow comes out, and then the restart, basically everyone overdrives turn 1. They all go hard into the wall. And then the ensuing restart with 3 to go. There's some chase, there's some playoff scenarios. And it was Jimmy Johnson, Martin Truex Jr. at the end. Jimmy spins, gets Truex in the final corner. Blaney comes for a third to win. And then it's a 3-way tie to advance in the chase with Jimmy Johnson being eliminated. I mean, it was exactly what NASCAR wanted. With it being on NBC, definitely helped as well. Number 3 is the second Martinsville race. Almost perfect. I mean, good God. Number 3. Man. Martinsville. I mean, if it wasn't for some of those long green flag runs, which got a little boring, it would probably be up there with Bristol and Chicagoland. But I can't fault this race too badly. It had some long green flag runs. It had a pretty good stage ending. And the craziness at the end. One of my favorite pictures, I'll actually show it right now, is from the broadcast. Coming to 5 to go. You know how the flagman does his 5 fingers in the air, kind of waves it, in the flag stand. I love how he's doing that, and then you see Logano and Truex literally dead even coming to the start-finish line. For some reason, I don't know why, that just gives me goosebumps. I don't know what it is about that picture, but it gives me goosebumps, and it's actually my Twitter header, right? I don't even like none of those drivers are even close to my favorite drivers in that picture, but for some reason, just that whole, there's 5 laps to go, and the leaders are side by side, and then 3rd, 4th, and 5th are right behind. It just gives me goosebumps. It gets me giddy. I don't know what it is about. Martinsville was absolutely amazing. Then we saw the bump and run at the end. I mean, fantastic race. Number 2, and possibly tied for number 1, the night race at Bristol. I think I give Chicagoland the bump over the night race at Bristol, but not by much. The night race at Bristol is basically perfect. We saw the early on chaos with the big one, and Kyle Busch getting all his damage. Which was, I mean, God, looked like Kyle Busch was done. And then he gets the free pass at the end of stage 2. We saw I think it was like 0.003 of a second at the end of stage 1. Like, that was absolutely amazing. And then stage 2 came down to a drag race between Logano and Chase Elliott. Then Elliott gets to the lead in stage 3, and then Kyle Busch gets the wave around, or the free pass at the end of stage number 2. And we have all this craziness going on. There's passing for the lead, left and right. I think, in my opinion, it's probably the best Bristol night race I've seen, and possibly the best of all time. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. Bristol night race, number 2, and not far behind number 1, Chicagoland. Chicagoland, in my opinion, what I want in a race was number 1. Long green flag runs, tire fall off, think like 23 lead changes, comers and goers, no one dominated the race. I think Eric Almirola may have led the most laps of like 80. Of like a 267 race, is it? 267 laps or something like that. Absolutely fantastic. And then we saw the ending, which was completely amazing. Larson running the wall, Kyle Busch running different lanes, trying to hold Larson off, the lap traffic impacting it, Larson getting there, trying the slide job as Dale Jr. exclaims twice, misses it, hits Kyle Busch into the wall, Kyle Busch spins him in turn 3, and goes on to win the race. Absolutely fantastic. With that being said, though, if I were to try to get some new fan into the sport, I would show them the night race at Bristol. If I were to get some old fan back into the sport, I would show them Chicagoland. Chicagoland had that. It just had that. Yeah, I don't know. The magic about Chicagoland was the fact that it stayed green. But that's something where if you're a new NASCAR fan, or if you're trying to get someone into the sport, I bet staying green wouldn't help. I bet that Bristol would probably be better to show someone if you wanted to get someone into the sport than Chicagoland. But in my opinion, Chicagoland is better because I've watched the sport for a few times, for a few years. So I actually like, I accept these long green flag runs, and I know they're part of the racing, and I actually like the long green flag runs better than, cautions every single lap. But in my opinion, those like front 5, those front 6, in my opinion, just looking at my list, the front 20 are all excellent. I would say the top 25 are all good. Like, I would rank the top 25 all good. And then 26th to about 30th, I would say we're decent. I would only say the second Texas race, the first Michigan race, the first Talladega race, the first Dover race, the first Las Vegas race, and Kentucky were horrible. I mean, and in a 36 race season, you're going to have horrible races, just like in the NFL. There are horrible games. There are great games. We saw that in NASCAR. We saw the best races and we saw some finishes that are going to go down in history as some of the best of all time. Martinsville, Chicagoland, the Roval, they're going to go down as some of the best of all time. And I enjoyed this season. I can say that. And I can say that at the end of Homestead, I was a little sad that the season was over. It was my first season watching without a favorite driver, and it certainly helped. I was able to enjoy this season more than any other season I have ever watched of NASCAR. And I can say that I can say that truly. I didn't have to worry about where Dale Jr. was running and why he was running 21st and why his car sucked and why he and Greg Ives were yelling at each other over the radio. I didn't have to worry about one single car. I worried about what they were showing, what was happening during the race, who got pit penalties. I was able to enjoy the races. It made the races so much more enjoyable. Would I have enjoyed Chicagoland, Bristol, and Martinsville even if Dale Jr. was running around 21st? I would have enjoyed them. I don't think I would have enjoyed them as much, though. I really think that I probably would have been like, this sucks. Especially Chicagoland, I probably would have been like, this sucks. He's going laps down, whatever. These guys are just running circles around him. But because I had no one to worry about, I just watched the race for the race. I didn't watch it to see how a driver was doing, how a team was doing. I watched it because I wanted to watch it. And that's the end thing. I didn't care who won the championship at the end. I didn't have an alliance. I watched that Homestead race for the Homestead race. If you liked Martin Truex Jr. and you yelled about it because Joey Logano, your most hated driver, won the championship, good for you. You have that prerogative. I didn't care. I went to Homestead looking for a good race. I got my good race. It was one of the better races of the season. And I can say I'm happy I watched NASCAR in 2018. It started out slow. It ended fast-paced and action-filled. And for that, I say thank you, NBC. You made this season one of the best I've ever watched of NASCAR. It's up there with 2014 and 2016 in terms of the best Gen 6 season. Whether you put it there or not is your prerogative. If you hate the season, you hated the season. I like the season. For that, just good job to NASCAR. I'm glad I got to witness the possible last season of the driver being worth, out on that racetrack because of the new rules package. For all we know, Homestead was the final race like that where the driver actually meant something and there wasn't slower speeds. But that's a whole different video. This video is about 2018. I'm going to end it with 2018. Chicagoland, Bristol, Martinsville, the Roval, Watkins Glen. The 5 best races of the season. 5 races you could show to a person wanting to get into NASCAR. And I think any one of those 5, that person would start watching NASCAR. And we saw that with the Roval. It was on NBC. People watched it because it was different. The ratings for Dover went up. The ratings for Talladega went up. I don't think it was a coincidence. You put on a good show, people will stay. We saw that for some races this season. I thank you guys for watching. Good season in 2018. I'm going to miss NBC. I hope that Fox can improve so that I'm not just dreading until Chicagoland comes around next season. I thank you guys for watching this video. Congratulations to all the teams and drivers that won championships in 2018. There's not much more to say other than I will see you guys for the next video.